Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Talking Behaviour, where I am Charlie, and with me is.
James, hello.
And we will be doing the final episode in our series about consequences that affect behaviour by talking about consequences that decrease behaviour, which I can't just say is an episode about punishment because we're also going to talk about extinction. I know, it sounds incredibly dramatic when you do it. If you are tuning into this without having seen the previous two episodes, please go and view those first because they give a general description about what this is going on and some basic principles around reinforcement, punishment, and extinction, and then an in-depth jump into consequences that increase behavior or reinforcement. Okay, so we're talking about what are the kind of last resort procedures of someone who is a behavior specialist. These are procedures which you only are allowed to use if you have tried reinforcement based procedures, which are literature supported, and you have been unsuccessful in reducing a high risk behavior which will be severely affecting someone. Okay? We then have to choose extinction based procedures and test these. What this requires is we have to identify what the function of a behavior is, why someone's doing what they're doing, and then make sure that they are unsuccessful in doing that by the procedure's design. Right? So this might be, for a couple of different examples, if they wanted attention, right, and they were to hit themselves in the head to gain access to it, this would mean not adding additional attention after they've hit themselves. As you might imagine, this is not the nicest thing to do in that situation, especially if someone is already distressed.
Yeah.
Right? But it is incredibly effective at proving that the behaviour did not have the correct effect on you.
It's letting your baby cry itself to sleep.
Yeah, it's unpleasant and it has negative outcomes and side effects. And there are studies which will tell you that if you let your baby cry itself to sleep, they end up being more likely to be depressed later on in life. So there's various things around this, and it's quite a good allegory, actually, that one, where it works, it is effective, it can be the only option, but it almost always has some negative side effects to it, right? So extinction is interesting in that it's different depending upon why you're doing what you're doing, and it's not different depending upon what you are doing in itself. As in, the form of your behavior is not actually anything to do with the extinction effect, right? It's about the function, right? It's not every time that you hit yourself, you get a negative thing put on you. It's every time that you want attention and hit yourself, you don't get attention.
Yeah.
So there's a direct relationship between antecedent and consequence there, right?
Yeah.
And basically, I told you this before, there is a very famous graph called the extinction curve, which basically starts with the basic level of the behavior occurring, right, where when you first did the assessment. You have the point that you instituted an extinction procedure and an initial increase called an extinction burst, where they tried harder and more to use the behavior to get what they were used to get out of it, right? This then, if unsuccessful, causes the behavior to sharply decrease to a point where it is very low to not happening. And then some point later, they might try to use the behavior again to see whether the consequence is still effective at stopping them, right? There are several things that can happen if this process is mismanaged, okay? If you institute an extinction procedure, you get the extinction burst and it increases in frequency, duration, and intensity.
Yep.
And then they succeed in getting the outcome. What you have taught them is the less intense version of that behavior is not effective, but the higher intensity version is, right? And that basically teaches you to escalate faster and more intensely, right? Quicker.
Yeah.
Straight to the top of that hierarchy. And then normally you get more effective at doing the thing that you were doing, right? So it can be very, very, very dangerous if you try and do this and you do not know how to manage it or stop the person from actually getting what they wanted, especially if you didn't even know correctly what they wanted in the first place. Because a lot of these behaviors, as I said, they're quite opaque, they're quite difficult to assess. If someone's doing something for an increase of attention and you misidentify that as them trying to access something tangible or trying to escape from a demand, you implementing the procedure will add attention to the situation and will increase the behavior happening. Right?
Yeah.
So that's why it's so complicated, and that's why extinction is very heavily regulated, and why we all sign up to the ethics code of the UK Society of Behaviour Analysts to always go reinforcement then extinction. Right? Now, what you'll notice is it's kind of like an enclosed loop with that one, right? The behavior itself increases in intensity, right? And so you can be quite you can generally guess with extinction that that is what's going to happen, right? If someone engages in a sensory behavior to avoid a demand, the sensory behavior will happen more and more, and the most danger you have there is that the increase in intensity makes it harmful.
Yeah.
Right? if someone is engaging in self-injury, a higher intensity self-injury will happen, right, which is quite dangerous. And so extinction with self-injury might actually be more of a risk than you actually want to deal with. But because the reinforcement being stopped is related to the antecedent, what you wanted, so is the increase in behaviour related to behaviour that was ineffective, right? Punishment's a different deal, okay?
Okay.
So punishment is a consequence that happens after a behaviour that causes the behaviour to occur less in future circumstances, less in the same circumstances, right? Punishment can be positive or negative. And negative punishment is punishment by removal, as in a timeout procedure, or removing someone's toys from an area if they've done something you don't like, or them having to sit on the naughty step. All of those would probably be some form of negative punisher. And then below that, the last type of procedure that we use is punishment by addition, where you might add something like effort, you might add something like an aversive stimulus, you might...
Shock collar.
Yeah, literally, that is actually a punishment procedure, unfortunately. And they are only ever used in the most extreme of circumstances. So the thing about these is they are the most effective form of procedure because they almost immediately stop the behaviour when they're used, if they're used effectively. And if they are not stopping the behaviour after use, they're not actually working as punishment.
Yeah.
It's like, again, defined by its effect, just like reinforcement, right? If someone does something they think is punishment, but the behaviour isn't going down,
It's not punishment.
the kid isn't perceiving it as punishment. Like,
That guy's got a kink.
yeah, or they're sitting and ignoring the punishment while it's happening and just stimming out of the window, which is still reinforcement enough for them to have a good time,
Yeah.
right? And so it's just ineffective, right? The unfortunate thing about it is the level of side effect that it will induce in a person, because punishment comes with something called punishment-induced aggression, right? And what you'll notice is aggression is inside of the term, right? Which means that it's consistent across any topography that you put this on, right? Doesn't matter what form of behavior the person is doing, if you punish it, eventually they will get aggressive to get rid of you.
Okay.
Right? Because the consequence doesn't relate to the function. It's every time you hit yourself, topography, you have consequence, punishment. It doesn't ever teach you what to do in those circumstances, number one, which means there's no replacement behavior to actually give you the way of getting what you want. And two, it just tells you no over and over and over again. And if someone keeps doing that to you, especially when you have no alternative behaviors, eventually you'll want to kill them. Like you will. And that's just torture. That is what that is.
Yeah. So obviously,
Mhm.
I know you said use it as a last resort. So would you, as a last resort, you have to, if you're going to use the punishment, you have to be able to also bring in a replacement
Yes.
action.
Yeah, I mean, always you're going to be working for restrictions and punishment. You're always going to have a skills teaching component, even for extinction, I would say this, right? You should always have a skills teaching component built into it, which is teaching some form of alternative behavior. The reason that, like, I go reinforcement is good, the reason that I go, like, even extinction isn't quite as bad as, like, a punishment, is because extinction makes sense to me, right? When you look at that, it's like you want a thing, but you're doing something inappropriate to get it, but you shouldn't get the thing if you're doing something inappropriate to get it, which will teach you not to do the thing, right?
Yeah.
Punishment, it really makes no sense to me. It's just saying no, not this way, right? And yes, it's very important to have a skills teaching component, and yes, you want to be trying to get someone to do something positive in that situation. But yeah, I would say that almost always, if you're using punishment, you will find that there is some variation of another procedure which will work.
Going
right.
involved, yeah.
And the only reason that I would not say that is if the behaviour that the person is showing is so intense that it basically is a risk to life or maiming, right? That is something where I would change my mind on that. Because then you need to stop it immediately. And it might be that they're bashing their head into a wall repeatedly, and you going, I'm going to, I don't know, remove your toys from the room, is going to stop you doing that. And then I can put the toys back.
Yeah.
And now you're not hitting your head on the wall, which is better, right? So again, you have to look at it in terms of proportionality, right? You have to look at it in terms of reasonableness, and you have to look at it in terms of social appropriateness, right? I think anything, any procedure, any like natural process has a place, right? But often it's in nature, not in like a highly constructed area, right? So your fight or flight reflexes are what effectively we're talking about with punishment-induced aggression, right? And fight or flight reflexes have a point. They stop you getting killed,
Yeah.
right? And if we, because we start understanding how all these different components work, start inducing accidentally those sorts of things, which are like survival instincts, it's very difficult for me to condone that.
Yeah, that's understandable.
And it kind of ties into a lot of stuff of like, there might be a point in 10 years where we look back on the reasons that we were instituting punishment and going, was that actually a real reason, or is that now historically looking back actually something that we are horrified that we used to do?
Yeah.
And yeah, I can't really get past that.
Yeah, fair enough.
So, always avoid punishment. That's the phrase. And I'll use it again. Any questions, James?
No, all good.
I imagine that'll be a short and sweet one, but thank you very much, everybody. I wanted this one out. Have a good one. Bye.